Hi,
Hi, everybody.
this is exciting. We are really, on a roll with our theme of goals and goal setting and really being prepared for this coming year. And tonight we're specifically talking about how to make your goals stick and how to adjust along the way. And this kind of looks different for everybody, but we're going to try to talk about some basic concepts and basic principles that we think are going to really help everybody to be on the same page. So the first thing that we're talking about is, basically how do you stick with a goal once you've put it in place, right? So we talked about, okay, we made these goals last week. We had 8 areas that we wanted you guys to think about, or we suggested, even rating them where you feel like you are, and then thinking about some goals for those particular areas. And then tonight, thinking about, okay, these are my goals. How do I stick with them? And the first thing I thought was really important is, how do you track your progress? What are some good ways of making this goal not seem so far away, but actually tracking it and seeing, okay, this is where I am with that particular goal. Do you have any thoughts about that?
We've kind of hit over the past couple weeks on keeping a calendar, keeping a journal, and how the importance of that. So I think that's your primary tool is being able to put those goals in a planner of some kind, and then as the year goes on, you're really sticking to that and really documenting your progress along the way, and then even breaking down, you have an overarching goal that you're wanting to accomplish by the end of the year, and breaking that down further into manageable steps.
Yeah, absolutely. And, even in the planner that I was sharing with you guys that I've been using, it has, I think they call them power sheets. Yes, power sheets, where you've broken your goal down into those different areas, month, week, and then day. And then you even track your daily progress just by like coloring it in or putting some sort of marking there. And when you track that, physically coloring something in or physically, putting a sticker someplace or physically writing it down, I think it really makes a difference as well, just in you seeing the progress as you go along. Kind of a similar idea as a journal, because then you're really seeing, okay, this is a trackable thing. It's not just in my head, and it's often easy to get in our heads, I think, when it comes to this and say, well, I'm not really seeing the results I want. And then if you track it, you see, okay, well, I've only done it 3 times. Well, that's not going to get you the result. I think we all know, like, oh, okay, well, doing something 3 times is usually not going to get you the result that you want.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we like to trick ourselves into thinking we're doing something more than we actually are.
Exactly.
And then we're, if we really kept track of what we were doing, then that really shows the truth of what we're really doing and what we're putting, the time we're putting in, if we're really, committing to the goals we set out.
Exactly.
There's a saying, what gets measured gets managed. And
I like that.
Sometimes, it's just easy to let ourselves off the hook if we don't document it, and it's even kind of it's kind of a way to escape the responsibility of doing it, because it's a way to kind of release ourselves of that burden of committing to something that we did. At least in my case, I know sometimes it's almost like if I don't write it down, then I don't have to be accountable for it.
Exactly. If I don't track it, then it's sort of like a way of like dodging it. It's almost like the procrastination thing. It's like, oh, well, I can put it off. I don't I really know what the numbers are. Well, that's causing you to then actually put off what you need to do. And I think we're going to touch on some other things that kind of help with that.
Yeah, and that just triggered, we used to watch Shark Tank a lot, and that's one thing. When all the entrepreneurs would come in, they have this grand vision, they would spiel this great tale, and then when they got asked what are your numbers, a lot of them didn't know.
They didn't know their numbers.
And so if we don't know our numbers, whatever the context that we're talking about, our goals, if we don't know, then how can we get to where we want to go if we don't even know where we are currently?
So true. There are so many times where I try to look back, even in my own business with my violin, teaching or my Arbonne business or even gigs and see, okay, how much did I make in this month or what kind of things did I do in this month? And it really is revealing, it's like, okay, well, there's a reason why you're only bringing in XYZ because you only did this much, or this is why you did so much better in this month because you were consistent or you were, having different events or you were reaching out to new people or you were teaching this many lessons or you were sharing more openly or you were advertising, those things matter.
Yeah. And going back to kind of what I was saying, maybe a little clearer illustration, is, if you're trying to lose weight, and I know in the past when I was trying to lose a certain amount of weight, and if you've committed to, I'm going to get on the scale once a week or once every other week.
Right.
Well, if you don't get on the scale, then you can kind of dream, well, it's not that bad. I mean, I ate okay. Well, I exercised a couple times.
Exactly.
But you know that if you get on that scale, it's going to tell you the truth. And that's what we kind of shy away from, whether it's weight loss or something else. We know that if we actually look at the details, we look at the data, then that's going to tell the truth that a lot of times we're trying to avoid.
Exactly. No, I totally agree. I mean, just facing the numbers, facing the progress as we go along. And this can be our friend or it can be our enemy. And I think that's kind of what we're both kind of dancing around here. You can have a really good relationship with tracking your progress or you can have a bad relationship with it. And we're saying, look, even when the days are difficult to look at that progress and say, I'm really not where I want to be. Like today I went on a run and I really was not where I wanted to be. But when we face that and we look at the number, then it actually does give us ease because then we can go, okay, now I know where I am. So it's easier to go where I want to go. Sort of like when you're going somewhere new, at least if you have your GPS coordinates, okay, at least I know where I am and I know where I need to go. Now it's a matter of making the right turns, taking the right steps, whatever.
Yep.
So then the next one I think is so critical is creating these clear milestones. One thing that I thought about with this is, when I was teaching violin in Indiana and had a larger studio, I always was trying to kind of incentivize my students by milestone, by trying to help them see the milestones. Because how we were looking at things was often like the book that they were on, and it takes a while to get through a whole book of music. It's not like 2 seconds, but it's helpful if I have a milestone to work toward, even if it's not like the full book right away. And so having these milestones, I think for us is so huge. Even with the example that we used last week, like we had a quarterly goal. Well, if you hit your quarterly goal of meeting X amount of people to try to help grow your friendships or your network, after that quarter, you could have something that was, like a reward for yourself or even just like something that kind of signifies you've reached this milestone. Mm-hmm. I know when I got into an orchestra in high school, normally, freshmen didn't get into this particular orchestra. It was harder. I'm not saying it was impossible. It's harder to get in as a freshman because you're competing against everyone in your age and then older. That's in high school. And then everybody in like a large area, that's auditions. And so it's less likely basically to acquire a position. And when I got into this orchestra as a freshman, some people who knew what work went into this and the milestone that it was actually got me a ring to kind of signify, hey, this is a milestone and we want you to recognize that we see this as an important step in your growth and in your development as a musician. And I think that's kind of cool. Whatever that looks like for you, it could be big or small.
Yeah, I think it depends on the what really motivates you as to be tailored to what's really going to push you forward, what's going to not be something that is going to detract from your goal. Like if you're trying to lose weight, maybe typically we would celebrate with a huge meal and ice cream, but maybe you can not that you can't indulge every once in a while, but maybe figuring out something that's really going to help propel you forward and really be, you know, appropriate for the step that you're on. You want it to be something that isn't so big that it's going to stall your progress, but something that you really can feel that you accomplished something and that you're on your way and that your overall goal is achievable.
I totally agree. And that kind of segues us into incentives, because those are kind of go hand in hand, I think. You know, with hitting a milestone, we often put an incentive there to help us want to hit that milestone and kind of look forward to that. Somebody recently was telling me, like, hey, what if you set I've got a big goal I'm going for by the end of this month. And so it's like, what if you set a milestone for yourself, or I mean an incentive to yourself if you hit this milestone, basically, so that looking forward to that time and being excited about it and reminding yourself about it is incentivizing to, you know, work really hard to get to it. And I think that's really fun. It could be an experience. It could be something that you really are wanting. You know, it could be something to do, you know, that you buy, or it could be something that you just make the time for. I think like Matt said, it really is dependent on you and what is important to you or your family.
Yeah, and I mean, there's different kind of incentives. Or there's the duality, the carrot or the stick. And sometimes we're motivated by one or the other, or sometimes it's, you know, depending on what it is. You know, yeah, like you said, normally we think about an incentive as we're going to reward ourselves with something, we're going to buy something for ourselves, but there can also be a fear of not accomplishing something that pushes us forward, especially if it's something that maybe you're doing with other people that you don't want to let them down.
Absolutely.
So, you know, if you're doing, you know, trying to run a race with a group of people, and if one of you doesn't do your training, well, then maybe you have to do something, something like do extra push-ups, or you have a pot of money or something that you have to give more to. Or I've even heard of ones where there's an app that if you don't accomplish a certain goal, you have to donate like $100 to the opposing political party. And so
or something that
you don't really
negative, like
you don't really support.
Something you don't support.
So you have to, again, it's all about tailoring it to what's going to motivate you.
Right. Well, and that's kind of, I feel like the like you said, the other side of it. You know, we have the incentives as something maybe that we desire, but then there's something that we are like afraid of, with almost like a penalty, or like you said, you know, something that we are very maybe disgusted by or appalled by. And sometimes in certain cases, that fear of not reaching the goal or hitting that milestone because of the negative consequences of that is more motivating for us. It just really, I think, depends on the person. I think of even with what Dave Ramsey says. He says, you know, you have to have that never again moment. And that doesn't come from like, I am so excited necessarily. It usually comes from anger. You know, you're angry that you have, or something like that. You're really upset that you have all this debt or whatever it is. And you have to have your moment of like, never again am I going to be in this situation. I never want to do this again. And sometimes those situations motivate us. I know I've had many of those in my life where I've been incentivized to not have a situation happen in a certain way again.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of the part too where you can bring other people onto your team, where you don't keep it a secret what your goal is, where you have an accountability partner or a friend who is able to have those discussions with you on, hey, did you do XYZ this week that you said you were going to do? Because again, we're enlarging our circle of people who can help us, and we're giving more accountability. We're not keeping this thing in secret so that if I don't accomplish it, well, nobody else really knows, and there's not really that much. It's not a big deal.
Right.
And so, you know, you're trying to stack the odds in your favor of winning, of accomplishing this goal.
Yeah, that reminds me of something really fun that a couple of friends and I are doing that all have Arbonne businesses. You know, we are in a text thread together, and we're trying to push each other and motivate each other, have work hours together and other things to really try to keep that fire alive of our goals and keeping each other accountable. And even just having that hour where I know somebody's waiting for me is huge. And you're like, you can't blow that off. If it's just a commitment I have with myself, it's easier to blow it off than if somebody's waiting for me, somebody's counting on me. I've even heard of like some groups where, you know, they just meet for 10, 15 minutes. It's at 7:30 a.m. every Wednesday or whatever it is. And they just each go, you know, around and say what they did or didn't do and what they're planning to do for the coming week. And just having that check-in, knowing that somebody is going to be waiting to hear that if you if you did the thing you said you were going to do, it's really motivating.
Yeah, and I think it takes, you know, just to be honest, I don't have that right now. And so it takes some courage. It takes some courage to say, you know, hey, can you hold me accountable for whatever it is?
Yeah.
But I think that's an opportunity too to strengthen a relationship,
Absolutely.
whether it's somebody you're already close to or maybe somebody who you're not as close to now, but you have an idea that they may be interested in similar things as you are.
For sure.
So it's an opportunity to increase that bond and that relationship. And, you know, they may say, hey, yeah, I'd love to. And can you do X, Y, Z for me?
Right. Exactly. I've definitely been in that situation before, and it's very, very helpful. It does, like you said, take a lot of courage. But when you do it, it's so worth it. You know, it's like, oh, there's somebody else that wants to accomplish more and do more and be more and all that. And then, you know, another thing, I would say the last thing that really helps us to like stay on track and stick with our goals is having a why and having a vision. And I was talking about this the other day, you know, when we were getting married over 10 years ago, my mom had a goal that she was working toward with making sure that she was looking her best for our wedding day, fitting in her dress really well and all that. And her why, her incentive was she kept pictures of my brother and I in her wallet. And she would pull out a picture of us, especially in this particular case, me, just because I was getting married. And she said, see, this is my daughter and she's getting married. And this is why I'm saying no to this cupcake or whatever it was. And so having a picture, having a song, or having something that really motivates you to stay on track when the going gets tough, because we're all going to have those moments, you know, where we're going to want to give up.
Yeah, and I think that's why you have to revisit it on a daily basis. It can't be something that you set at the beginning of this year and you don't really think about it. It has to be something that you're affirming and strengthening in your mind every day. Like you said, you're using these visual clues, your cues, you're using whatever tools you can, your senses, to tie these whys and this powerful vision to you and make it as strong as possible, make it amplify it as big as possible.
I love that.
You know, Tony Robbins talks about, you know, when you're visualizing these, making these as big, these positive things as big in your mind as possible, to where they're just like right there and you can reach out and touch them.
Right, exactly.
And so I think that's, you know, every day you have to be working on these, whether it's 5 minutes a day or if you know 10 minutes a day, even 1 minute a day, as long as you're dedicating time to recentering yourself and seeing, this is why I'm doing this is my why, this is my who, this is my vision, then that's going to strengthen it and really make it a lot more achievable for you.
Exactly. That was, it reminds me of something that we have for, you know, Arbonne every year offers an incentive trip that you can earn, and they have all these really cool like graphics that you can track your progress. But if you just let it go by the wayside and don't ever track your progress, or only do it like the first couple of days, it's not going to be very motivating. But to have pictures up of the destination and to track your progress as you go along and to celebrate the wins in those moments, it's really exciting, and it provides that encouragement and that reminder for you, sort of built in. Hey, you've got this big goal and you're working toward it and you're making progress. One thing I think is really cool that I plan to do this week is, and a couple friends of mine have either posted about it or told me about it, is you can actually make a vision board on Canva, and you can just have something that you like make as your wallpaper on your phone. They have, if you're not familiar, Canva is an incredible site. It's mostly free, but they have some different things that you can purchase on there for really reasonably, usually like, you know, under $5. But basically they have all these cool templates, and different things that you can use to make all sorts of different graphics, resumes, invitations. I mean, it's crazy. Just go on there tonight, Canva, and check it out if you haven't already. But you can just get a sort of a collage going there, and they either have different images or you can upload your own images and create your own vision board right there that reminds you of all the reasons why you are wanting to stick to these goals this year. Because it's one thing to say, I want to lose 30 pounds or I want to run a marathon. But if you're not incentivizing yourself, if you're not noting what it's going to take, and you're not visualizing and seeing it and having a powerful why, then it really doesn't, it's not going to be that have that power behind it that you really want. And it's easy to let the voices, the negatives, kind of overpower.
Yeah, and it's not you. Yeah, it's definitely the negatives, but it's just the lacking momentum. You know, it's a lot easier to sit on the couch and watch TV for 2 hours at night instead of working on your goal for 30 more minutes. So it's not even. It's yes, it's the negativity, but it's also just the day-to-day things that aren't positive or negative, but are inhibiting us from really going for what we want.
Yeah.
And so that's why, I fall into that trap all the time, but that's why we have to have those on a daily basis to remind us.
Yeah.
Because at least if you're like me, you think, oh, well, I'll get to it later, or I'll still have time later.
Right.
And, that works in some cases, but eventually that's going to catch up to you.
Right. I mean, later doesn't always come. Someday doesn't ever come, really. So we were going to just make a few points about adjusting as you go along. So one thing that is going to happen, of course, we're wanting to stick to these goals. We're wanting to do all these things that we just mentioned, but sometimes adjustments need to be made as we go along. And the first one that we were thinking of is, sometimes we have this goal of, let's say, running the marathon, but we're not doing the activity that it takes to get us ready for the marathon, whenever it is. And we have to be willing to, again, know our numbers, know the activity it's going to take. And then if we're not willing to do what it takes to get to that goal, we either need to adjust the goal or we need to adjust our activity. And there kind of has to have that, we kind of have to have that like come to Jesus moment of, okay, I either have to change the goal or I have to change the activity. And I've heard of different activities where when you're doing whatever activity, let's say you have to go for a run and hit certain milestones. Okay, maybe you have a why that you are, that you attach to that particular activity. And if you don't do that activity, you got to cross that off your list. Well, nobody wants to cross a why off their list, right? Nobody wants to give up on a goal. So even if you attach like, okay, this why is going to go with this particular activity, sometimes that can be really motivating. But again, we just have to be serious about, the reality of it.
Yeah, and that made me think, I heard of, some of you may be familiar with Lewis Howes. He's on the internet, he's written several books and other things, but he's working on training for a marathon right now. And one of the things he does is every time he goes for a run, he has somebody he's running for during that training run.
Oh,
and then when he actually does the run, he's going to wear 26 bracelets for 1 mile for each person.
Wow.
And so when you have that meaning and that on you that I'm running this 1 mile for so-and-so, that means something to me. Like, you're not going to quit.
Cool.
Like, you're not going to quit on your mom, on your mom's mile. You're not going to quit on your brother's mile. You're not going to quit on your daughter's mile. You're not going to quit on your spouse's mile.
Yeah, exactly.
And so maybe not have to be that drastic, but when there's these things that you like you were saying, just to give an example of that, like, who are you training for today? Who are you going to that interview for today? Who are you starting that business for today? Who are you reading your Bible verse for today? Whatever it is, because then it's, again, all these are tools that you're stacking to make it more achievable for you to do the thing that you need to do.
Exactly.
When your willpower isn't enough, because we like to think that, well, I'll have the willpower to do it. Yeah. Well, maybe yes, maybe no, but the thing is to make the environment so that you don't have to rely on your willpower.
Exactly.
The example that I always like to use is that we could put a bunch of ice cream in the fridge and hope that we don't eat it, or we could just not buy the ice cream. And it's kind of foolish to put the ice cream in the freezer and hope that, well, I'm going to be
strong
strong enough to not eat it. And maybe you are, but I know I'm not. So that's why you're creating this environment that's going to make it easier for you to achieve your goals.
Exactly. No, I think that's so true. We can't just hope that everything's going to turn out okay. And we've got to get serious. Do we need to change the goal, or do we need to change what we're willing to do?
And I think just, we want to make clear too that we're not saying just because something's hard doesn't mean you should quit your goal.
No, absolutely
So,
not.
But at the beginning of the goal, you do need to, there's stories in the Bible about counting the cost.
Yes.
You have to,
yes.
You don't go to war without counting how many men you're going to need. And so before you start this goal, you do need to sit to make sure you can do it. You have what it takes. You have the resources. You have the people support system. You have the time. You're going to commit the time to being able to achieve that goal before you start.
Yeah, I think, yes, counting the cost. And also, I mean, that kind of brings us to our next point. It's okay to jump in and say, I don't know how it's all going to work out yet, but I know where I'm going. And so, but you have to have, like you said, that heart and that focus of, okay, I'm going to make this work. And, I've heard of a lot of situations, to our next point, where somebody's had to pivot based on what they know a particular situation is going to look like. So a really great example of this is my brother started out really wanting to to be an engineer. And he got into his degree plan and started to learn more about, okay, what does an engineer do, etc. And then he compared it to what he really envisioned himself doing. And he went, this doesn't really quite line up. It's close, but it doesn't quite line up. And so he ended up going into construction management, which is nearly the same degree, but you have a slightly different role. You're more hands-on, you're more in the job. And he can tell you more specifically what he does. I don't really... I don't know all the ins and outs, but you see what I mean, that he didn't just quit and give up, but he was willing to say, this isn't quite what I know that I want to go into, but it's close. Now I just need to make this little change so that it can be along the lines of what I know I want to do long term. And so I think we have to be willing to kind of make those adjustments sometimes. It doesn't mean that the goal completely changes, but it means that maybe our path looks a little different than we expected it to look.
Yeah, and I think there's a term called sunk cost that is you've gone so far into a certain area that you've sunk so much time or resources or money into something that you're so tied into that even though really I don't want to do this anymore, you persist because of all the resources and time that you've put into it. So just as an example, let's say you went and you became a doctor and you've sunk hundreds of thousands of dollars and tons of education into it. And 5 years into your career, you realize, I don't like this. I don't want to be a doctor anymore. Right. But you've sunk so much into it that you're going to persist, even though you know that this isn't really what I want. And so we have to, not be afraid of that, because, like you hinted at, a lot of those things that you did aren't for nothing. You can use them and redirect them towards something else that you really want to do. Right.
I mean, and that's kind of a rare case, but I think it's good to point out that you shouldn't just continue to do something because you put all this time or money into it. I think it's important that you take those skills that you learned and then apply it to something else, and be as responsible about how you apply that to something else as possible. It just reminds me of a really good example of that I heard in a book called Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, where this guy really wanted to open his own bakery. And so he started working at this bakery anyways, and he ended up, through a different series of events, opening a bunch of gyms. And you're like, how did you get from a bakery to a gym? Well, his whole goal was to start to build businesses and start to build his wealth through building businesses. But he started out thinking a bakery was the way, and it ended up being these gyms and then on to other things. But, I think our point is don't be afraid that it might look different than you expect, but that you could still be on the right path and still getting to your goals. And then the last thing about adjusting that we wanted to know is, if something isn't working or you're not getting results, the way you want to, but you know, okay, this is the thing I want to be doing. We need to be open to feedback from other people, or we need to be open to getting training and being willing to be shaped and mentored where we are not seeing results, especially. And so it's like, if you're like if you have a network marketing business, for example, and you're getting, you know, 100 no's in a row, you're probably doing something a little bit, you know, not quite right. It doesn't mean that you're really off, but it means that you may not be asking the questions in the right way. You may just need a little bit of coaching, and then you could be seeing a different result. And so I think there's an adjustment that could happen there is, okay, if you're just banging your head and doing the same thing and the same thing, well, we've got to change something up. We've got to be willing to make a change in order to get a different result.
Yeah, and that, I mean, we've talked about this in other episodes, but that's where you have to be coachable. You have to, you know, again, go out of your comfort zone to say, hey, can you help me with this? And maybe you have to pay somebody some money to coach you for a while to correct you, but it's going to be worth it in the long run. You have to be willing to invest the time and resources and let go a little bit of your ego and thinking that you know the best way to do it.
That's the hard part.
And even sometimes, you know, this is where you're wanting to go a level. You're wanting to level up.
Yes.
You've gone as far as you can on your own, and you're hitting a brick wall.
Right.
And you know, we have to let go of our ego and stop hitting the brick wall and figure out a way to get over it. And sometimes we, not any fault to our own, but just based on our experience, we don't have the resources. We don't have the knowledge, and that's why you have to bring somebody else in to help you.
And I mean, we talked about the importance of mentoring and finding a good mentor, having mentors in your life. And this is just where, you know, it's not anything about you not being capable. It's everything about you finding the right mentors, the right resources, the right training to get you on the path where you need to go. And often it's not a huge shift. It's just small things. It's like, hey, what if you worded this way? What if you included a business card in this way? Or you know, shifted the way that you, you know, ask a question or go about advertising or go about communicating with your customers, or I don't know. I mean, there's often just like these small shifts that we can make. And I mean, we're just talking about business, but you know, you could bring this across the board. You know, what if you just changed, you know, the way that you trained in this particular way, or the way that you ate, or, you know, I mean, there's a million different little shifts that you can make in all these different areas, all these different goals that we've been talking about, that you can make. And that's where mentors, they really help you, or even like having, you know, counselors or life coaches or other things, they really help you to make those leaps much faster than you doing it on your own. And again, it's that whole thinking we have all the answers, or we can get there on our own. We may be able to, but this is really going to help, you know, speed up the process. And in doing that, we have to sacrifice our ego.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of times we think, well, I can't afford to bring somebody else on. I can't afford somebody to help, but really maybe you can't afford not to.
Right.
And again, it's an investment because they're going to be able to take you where you haven't gone before.
Exactly. Well, it reminds me, I don't know if I told you about this, but I was listening to a podcast recently, and this girl was saying she coaches specifically entrepreneurs that are what do you call that? Empaths. And I'm an empath. So I was just learning and listening from her podcast, and she was talking about like, I was willing to pay however many thousands of dollars for her degree that she doesn't use. But she's like, but I'm not willing to pay $1,000 or $2,000 for a training that's specifically in my area, that's specifically going to help me in the way that I'm working right now. And I think sometimes that's how we think. And I was like, wow, that's a really good point.
I mean, that's like a whole nother topic on the education system, but
Right.
I think a lot of it is because we think that a degree is going to, you know, people are going to recognize it and it's going to get us in the door, regardless
Right.
of whether or not we're actually learning something. Whereas
Exactly.
we don't trust that if we take a course from somebody that isn't, you know, a college, that it's really going to be valuable or it's going to help us. And the funny thing is that you're hinting at is, if it's something that is interesting to you and something that is what you're excited about,
Right.
then you're going to be so much more invested in that. Even if
Yeah.
it's a, you know, regardless if it's a $10 course on Udemy or one of those platforms or Skillshare,
Right.
you're going to get so much out of that as opposed to something that you have no interest in.
Right.
But yeah, no.
You're not putting your heart and your soul into, and you're just kind of drudging through. Yeah, so true. But anyways, we wanted to kind of hit some of these highlights. This is probably not everything. Kind of get to the major points here. But if you have anything that you would add to this list of, you know, helping you to stick to it and adjusting as you go. There's little adjustments that have to happen along the way, just like a car, you're thinking of your destination. You've got to make little adjustments with your wheel along the way. And these are just some major ones that we thought of and we think could help you as you go along. And, you know, next time, we are really hopeful that to be able to share some big things that we plan to do this year and offer this year, and we're really, really excited about them. We're excited to share them, and we just are so appreciative. We can't believe we're 31 episodes in. This is crazy, and we're so grateful for your support. Thank you for continuing to be on our journey, on this journey with us. And, you know, please let us know how we can serve you or help or maybe cover a topic that you want to hear about. And, of course, subscribe and share on YouTube, No More Some Days, and then follow us on Instagram at No More Some Days with a Z. And we just appreciate you guys so much.
Thank you guys. Have a good week.
Bye.